There is really one number that we submit in our budget for the Otis Library. We do not provide any line item detail, but the one line item. And we did have a meeting with the partial board meeting a couple weeks ago, and we let them know what the number would be, so they'd have a little time to think about it a little bit, and that's where we are. So I'll turn it back over to you.
I really don't know what you want me to say. Does anybody have any questions on anything?
If you don't have a presentation, that's fine.
We don't have a presentation.
Okay.
We can answer any questions you might have about our services, programs, financing, anything.
Alderwoman Gould.
Oh, good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. And congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
Get about a little over $50,000 increase in your budget. What do you plan on spending that on?
That'll go into our operating expenses. We rely on the city primarily for the less glamorous expenses. Our largest expense is personnel. So that will be absorbed into our personnel expenses, our utilities expenses, insurance, all that sort of thing.
Okay, so you won't be adding any programs?
We fund our programs. That will be part of what the city funds, but we try to use our endowment and our fundraising and our grants and our other restricted donations and stuff like that to fund programs, materials, and library-related expenses.
Thank you.
Members, pro tem, please.
So thank you all for being here tonight. And the community, to a great degree, is well aware of just the tremendous work that you do. I really have two questions. First, your programming and your services, how have they changed since the change in leadership? And the second question has to do directly with your budget. The proposed is roughly $80-some thousand less than your request. And I'd be interested to know, what would that $80,000 represent in terms of services that you would otherwise be able to provide if you had that money?
Well, for programs, this goes back to your questions too. We are always trying to expand our programs. So in this new year, we're focusing on wellness and trying to help people with their mental health, physical health, all around health, including financial health. So one of the new programs we're initiating is going to be a whole financial literacy series. We're going to do one-on-one counseling services. We're going to work with local banks and financial advisors, and they'll provide one-on-one counseling for people who maybe lost a spouse and are now new to handling their finances, or they're graduating from high school and they're on their own now, or they're trying to get college funding. Because we've done programs in the past, financial programs, but very often it's so personal that people are reluctant to ask questions. So we're going to take a more one-on-one approach and have people meet individually and get their individual counseling. And then in addition to that, though, we're also going to have more public programs with for home buyers and retirement and Social Security, and some of that has already begun, but we're going to expand on all of that to help people with their finances.
You done?
I could go all night.
So just to follow up on that, certainly we recognize the importance of the library. I don't want to say community center. I don't want to use that term because that's not the term I'm looking for. But people looking for things, information, looking for ideas. The library has become a central place for people to stop in. And just expanding some of these ideas makes it more inclusive for the entire community. A lot of it sounds like it's not what a library should be doing, but in our community, it's what a library should be doing. Because of where we are and who we serve, people know where to come. It's a unique library, it's a unique community, and we try to serve as many as possible with their needs.
And then some other things that we're trying to do too, because we submitted our budget request, hopefully, but we're also realistic, and we know that we weren't going to get exactly what we wanted. So we're leaning into our partnerships more for public programming. So, for instance, we're working with Public Works to do a recycling and trash program and educate people on recycling and trash. We worked with another partner to address loneliness because that has become so pervasive in our community for primarily 18 to 22-year-olds. People thought it was older, but it's not. So we're working on things like that with our existing partners to try to save money and pool resources and do things like that. But we're also always expanding on our programs for all ages. We always say we serve cradle to grave. So.
I just have one more, Mark, if it's okay. This question might be more suited to Mike. Clearly, the programming would benefit from the $80,000 gap, right? And I would imagine that the library is going to do everything it can to still provide those services minus the $80,000. From the financial standpoint, how does that impact your other funding sources if that money does not come from this budget?
What we did was took a look at our investments, and we are moving some of the bond portfolio. There was some maturing bonds into short-term stock portfolio, trying to grab a little more yield on the way up. We figure we're gonna run about 7% annually in costs. Of course, trying to control that, but we're pretty sure we can get close to 5%. So what we're losing in that funding, we're adding a little more risk into the portfolio to try to make up, to maintain those program services.
And, you know, your record for guiding investments is well known and excellent work. So I'm glad to see you on board with the Otis Library.
Thank you.
And that ends my questioning. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Bencourt.
Yeah, I was just curious, I haven't been up here in a few years, so how is the endowment doing? And your other fundraiser?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
How is the endowment doing and the other fundraising?
Going well, Harry.
The endowment's doing well. We just did a complete review with our investment advisors, and it's headed in the right direction. It's doing well.
Is that because of, I mean, recent market performance largely? Or?
In large part, yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
In answer to your question about how is this going to affect us losing the money, our staff are not well paid. So unfortunately, in budget considerations, we have few things that we can control: materials and salaries. And, you know, utilities, insurance, and things like that, we have no control over. We try to be efficient with everything that we do. But our staff, we have people who have their master's degrees working full-time, making $46,000 a year. When we looked at the area salaries, our region, our library region is Region 6, which is essentially New London County. And we're after working and working, we're still about the 50th percentile in our region. For management, we're between 25th and 50th. So we still have a lot of work to do. For our professional librarians, we're less than 25th. So that's where a lot of this, unfortunately, takes the hit. It's with our staff, who are excellent staff, and they're not being paid what they should be paid, especially for one of the largest libraries in the region.
Members have other questions at this time? Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate you attending. Luck.
We've switched the order, so NPU is next, I think you have to have you loaded up the laptop? You have the zip drive or? Okay, you got it, okay.
Right, they're working.
And for a public record, everyone introduce yourselves, please. We know who everyone is, but if any people at home are watching the budget discussions.
That should be
How about now?
working. Yeah, it's working. We also have a handheld if you need an extra one. Okay, you're,
All right.
good, you're all set. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you for having us here to discuss the fiscal year 25 budget for NPU. My name is Chris LaRose. I'm the general manager for Norwich Public Utilities. I have my two division managers here, Steve Cinco and Jeff Brining, and our communications and community outreach manager, Chris Riley, handing out the handout.
Let me just stop you for 1 second. On page 132 and 133 are probably the most significant numbers in our budget that'll help you see where we're at and they're at with their budget for this year. I directed them to the summary pages, Chris, in our budget, and submitted by you.
Chris got one more to hand out, and I'll get going here.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Our budget priorities have remained consistent with past years' budgets and reflect the operational costs needed for meeting state and federal regulatory requirements. They're continuing to get more and more difficult to meet the minimum requirements for both state and federal, with new items being added on such as cyber and physical security, which is something that we've never been looked at before. In addition, we are investing in aging utility infrastructure. When we were founded in 1904, we're still operating some of those same utilities that were put in the ground back in 1904. It's very critical that we are supporting the economic development in Norwich, and we are contributing to NCDC and doing all we can to make businesses successful here in Norwich, and exceeding customer expectations for customer service and especially for reliability. Our staff is very proud of the product we provide and the services, especially in storms. And last but not least, utilizing technology for the continued benefit of NPU in the city. Wherever there's a collaborative effort we can help out with, we will. Looking at the overall revenue and expenses, we had modest growth in customer usage, but what you're seeing is the wholesale energy prices last year were inflated by the Ukraine war and the impact on global markets. Those markets have come down to more reasonable levels, and our resulting revenue this year is $106 million. So slight growth, lower commodity cost, lower budget. Our spending is dictated by our revenue projections, and we plan our expenses based on using up that $106 million. And we're also using $2.6 million of cash to fund required capital expenses this year. Some of the highlights of the budget include reducing customer energy costs by over $3.9 million. That's additional money going into the pockets of our customers, and it's also helping businesses in Norwich stay competitive and remain competitive. Also, a big highlight is increasing the payment to the city by more than $1.2 million. That's a reflection of last year's high energy costs. Payment to the city is based on 10% of the gross revenues for gas, electric, and water. By statute, sewer revenues can't be included in this figure. Since wholesale energy costs have come down significantly in the last half of '23 and the first half of '24, we expect next year's payment to be a little closer to $9.6 million. So when you look at that, there are ups and downs on that curve, mostly caused by wholesale energy costs. When it comes to funding capital projects, we're always looking for the lowest cost financing to complete our larger projects. In this year's budget, we have secured significant PHMSA, DWSRF, and Clean Water Fund CWF grants and low interest loans to make our projects much more fundable. When you're looking at the amount of the loan and the grants, this is an unprecedented year for capital spending for NPU. Very large projects. We'll get into those in a few minutes. NPU was created to serve our customers in Norwich, and we are providing a $2.7 million in direct and indirect support, including our matching payment plans, utilizing TVCCA programs, and implementing our community assistance rate to help our customers who are most in need. We also provide over $1.9 million in efficiency rebates and incentives that include electric heat pumps, electric vehicles, and charger rebates. In addition, NPU saves our customers over $975,000 a year in natural gas gross receipt taxes. We're very grateful to the Norwich delegation for passing this very important bill to bring the customer savings back to Norwich. Using the Neighborhood Assistance Act, we can direct tax credits to local nonprofits. And this year, we're able to direct over $140,000 to St. Vincent de Paul and the Norwich Historical Society for very important energy efficiency projects, making those businesses or entities much more cost-effective when it comes to utilizing their utilities. We are proud to have rates 20% lower than our surrounding communities served by investor-owned utilities, and we're extremely proud of our storm and emergency response that the men and women of NPU provide. We'll continue to work collaboratively with all city departments and provide value wherever we can. Moving forward, we plan to continue construction on the $200 million sewer plant upgrade and do necessary sewer lining and replacements. These are needed infrastructure improvements to reduce infiltration into our system and water going into the sewer plant. These combined projects will be completed in 3 to 5 years. In water, we'll continue our lead and copper service line assessment and construction. We'll be painting the Yannick tank and adding mixing systems in 3 tanks to improve water quality throughout our water system. We're also planning on spending the first half of our $10 million gas grant to remove a significant portion of the remaining cast iron mains in our system. We'll be spending over the next year, but as with any grants that have not been done previously, it's taking a long time to get through the necessary documentation to get the grant money coming. We have now been able to fund the design. We should be able to go out for a bid in the next few months and then start this project early next year. In electric, we're starting a 34.5 kV tie line to our substations to allow more distributed generation in our system. And we're also planning a transmission upgrade that will replace some of our transmission structures. It's an unprecedented level of investment, construction, and activity at NPU over the next 5 years. We have federal funding opportunities to make the timing correct for getting it done, and we have the right team in place to get all of this work done. At this picture, you can see the start of construction at our sewer plant. If you look, everything to the north end of the island has been grubbed. and they're starting the construction of the first large tank that's going in on the left-hand middle of the picture there. It's going to be one step at a time. We're going to be building a structure, taking the old structure offline, demolishing the old structure, doing another building of a structure. It's going to be quite a challenge for our team to keep a plant running, meeting permit, while you're building a new plant around it. By the time we're done, we will have a completely new plant. If you look to the right, that's one of the pictures of our substation flooding. We received $800,000 to flood-proof this station. We're also looking at a great opportunity to potentially move this station, make it larger, and have extra capacity for electric vehicles and electrification. So I know we had talked to the council a few months back on potential improvements needed in the electric system. We're going to start the planning of the first improvement this year, and then that'll be coming down the road for construction at a later date. We presented this budget to the NPU Board of Commissioners on March 26th, and they will finalize and vote in the April or May board meetings. We're expecting more discussion and more questions from the board, but in all likelihood, we will have it done next month. We also have the ability to push it off one more month after that, and then our budget gets approved in conjunction with the entire city budget in June. You have any questions for me or my staff? Mark?
But just regarding, the sewer plant project and stuff, how big of an impact is obviously this kind of weather? We've had a very wet, season, let's just call it, monsoon weather, basically. So how big of an impact is that to the project?
So as far as construction, it's like any construction. If you get a lot of rain, you're losing construction days. There's work to be done inside and outside of the plant. So as far as construction, I don't think that's causing a big issue. And then
I was thinking more in terms of the water input to the system.
So this is a challenge that we routinely deal with. It's just we have had constant rain throughout the year. Normally we have dry periods and wet periods, but the plant can handle 15 million gallons a day. We, on a normal day, have almost been running that much routinely, and instead of the 5 like we would normally have if we weren't having such a wet March and wet winter. So, but the plant is capable of handling it. It will handle it better when we have the new plant up and running. That 15 million max, and the rest goes, goes into the CSOs, is going to be pushed up to 22, and we'll have the capacity to add a wet weather train in the next phase of the plant, which will be in the 5 to 10 year range, and that will hold do up to 80 million gallons a day.
Thank you, Chris.
Stacy, did you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry.
Normally through the chair. It just helps coordinate things, but go ahead, Alderman Gould.
So I want, excuse me, want to ask you about something for the future. If there is a national or state push for electric vehicles,
Yes.
do we have the infrastructure to handle electric vehicles all throughout the city of Norwich? And what kind of, if we don't, what kind of impact could that have on the city?
Right, so we had done a preliminary study, and right now, if every vehicle in Norwich was electrified, we'd be looking at triple the load that we have now. So that includes rebuilding substations, adding new substations, doing a lot of work where we have one transformer doing 5 to 10 homes. It may be one transformer for 1 to 2 homes. There's going to be a lot of work in the distribution system, a lot of work throughout our substations. So that's not to mention the amount of work that needs to be done for adding new generators in New England to provide this power as well. It's going to be a challenge, and if it happens organically, we can grow organically. If it is forced too soon, it's going to be a major impact to customer rates.
Thank you.
I believe it was $465 million impact, $270 million just to upgrade 3 existing substations and build 2 new ones.
Yeah. And when we look at the problem of the flooded substation, and there's a potential for a large development coming to town, we can maybe combine it with that large development, and that would be a great opportunity to do the first phase of that upgrade.
I just want to thank NPU in general. When you look at Arkham Industrial Center, which is something down the road in the future can help us address our revenue needs greatly, that wouldn't be possible without NPU support and your commissioners. I don't see any of them here tonight, but I want to mention that we are greatly appreciative of their support. And this really started well over 4 years ago when the team, the city, NPU, and NCDC started working towards that opportunity to secure our own future. I think that needs to be stated because we really need new revenue sources, and that only comes with growth in our grand list. This agency in particular makes that possible.
Yeah, it's been a great collaboration between the city, NCDC, and NPU, and we're looking forward to seeing our first tenants and the road going into that park.
Thank you. Members else? Yes, Pro Tem, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. I would just like to say, as a ratepayer, I was very happy to see the slide in there that states that the rates are 20% lower than investor-owned utilities. You know, we hear social media nonetheless, right? We hear a lot of chatter about, oh, you know, the rates at NPU, the rates at NPU. But when you can compare what we pay to what customers of other utilities, shall remain nameless, right, pay, all right, we're getting a heck of a bargain. And then on the reliability piece, I mean, you mentioned it with all of the rain, and the rain has been absolutely crazy, and with all the impacts of the rain, you know, the outages on the electrical side have been sporadic at most, right? So the reliability of your grid and the local networks and the substations has been top notch. I think in the last year, I think my power's been out for 45 minutes, and that was it, one time. So I guess I'm just trying to say that you're doing a great job. Just keep the ball moving forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members, questions at this time? Guess we're all set.
Feel free to ask any questions, and thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Okay, the final budget for this evening is the Norwich Board of Education. And please come up.
I liked having the tables. I liked having the tables. Remember we had used to do the tables and kind of been more in the round kind of thing.
Theater in the round.
Yeah. Very apropos. Yeah, because of this stuff.
Do you have I know you had it up before I got here. Do we need to reboot the presentation,
I don't know if it's on.
Bob,
Can you hear me?
or?
Where's the mouse?
Thanks, Josh.
Yep.
We know it's there, right? It was there when we got here, so.
It's sitting there. Some kind of PowerPoint. There we go. You have to clear. Okay.
Thanks, Josh.
That looks like it.
Okay, good evening, city council members.
It's not on.
So I'll just,
It's not on, it's on.
yeah, we can hear you.
Closer.
Yeah, that needs to be closer, yeah. So just pull it closer.
Got it. How's that? Can you hear me now?
Can hear you great.
All right.
And I just, I won't do any introduction. I talked quite a bit about the Board of Ed budget last night, so welcome, and we're looking forward to your presentation tonight.
Thank you, appreciate it. All right, so we'll just start with introductions. So Susan Lassard, Acting Superintendent, Norwich Public Schools.
Bob Serpensky, Business Administrator.
Yours isn't on. Oh, here it is.
There, how's that?
There you go.
Okay, I'm Bob Serpensky, I'm the Business Administrator.
Jamie Benner, Acting Assistant Superintendent.
So again, good evening, City Council members, Mr. Solomon. Last night, Mr. Solomon said that this was his 9th budget presentation. This is my first budget presentation. So, and I hope you enjoy my pie chart, Mr. Solomon. I did one just for you today. So just before, I know last year we didn't do slides, so thank you for allowing us to present some slides today. You all have the 66-page Board of Ed summary that Bob handed out. Does everybody have a copy of that? Okay. I have just six slides to present, and then we welcome questions. In this, just to give you a viewpoint of students for this budget, we have approximately 3,200 K through 8 students, approximately 1,200 NFA students, and a total with magnet schools in Griswold, about 4,500 students. So just to talk about the process, I'm going to go to the second slide first. February 1st, we had our first subcommittee meeting. There was Board of Ed members and City Council members on Zoom for these meetings. For February 1st, we talked about fuel, facilities, and transportation. On February 8th, we spoke about technology, facilities, utilities. February 22nd, salaries, benefits, grants, full-time employees, otherwise known as FTEs. March 7th, outside services, purchase services, and then all supplies. And on the March 12th Board of Ed meeting, the Board of Ed approved our budget. So we'll start with this slide. As you can see, where the Board of Ed approved a $100,084,846 budget. I just want to point out a few things on here. Special education outplacements, I know this is a big talk, big driver. I know Mr. Solomon said this yesterday at his budget presentation. It's a big driver is our special education costs. We have, just for the special education outplacements that you see that number, 11,011,700. That's net, that's without the excess cost of the 72%, or that would be 13.8 million. And just to put that in perspective, that's for about 127 students. Last year was the first that tuitions overtook salaries. And again, the big driver was the special education outplacements. When we talk about the tuitions, I just want to break it down a little bit. NFA, just for the regular education, it's 19.1 million. For special education, it's 7.8 million, and that's a total of $27,433,000, and that's 27% of the total budget.
Can I stop you for a second, just on the first, the asterisk of the 38.9 million, that includes the 11.7 for tuition for outplacement of the schools? So it's,
That's correct.
okay,
And if I could just add in that, that's a net cost in relation to excess costs, so the $2+ million that we get in reimbursement has been factored into that.
okay, thank you.
So just some major considerations. I know we've talked about these during the subcommittee. Risk item, the magnet school 58% tuition cap legislation. That's unknown right now. That would be an impact of $375,000 if that doesn't happen. Special education costs continue to escalate at a high rate. Bob reviewed actually something today from the state and I'll let Bob talk about that real quick.
Yeah, I can share some information that we received, and you've heard us talk about the impact that special education costs have had on this district and every district statewide. This is based on the March 1st filing. All districts have to update the filing that we do in December. The total cost that qualified for excess cost was $260,551,988. The state allocated $181,119,782. So there's between 100% funding, they have a shortfall of over $79 million. So when we last gathered, the impact to Norwich was about $800,000. Well, our costs have risen since the December filing, so now the impact of and as a result of this increase in cost is now $899,000, and our reimbursement rate has dropped from 72.9% down to, I think, 71.4%. So the costs continue to escalate, and it's a problem that has gone from large to enormous, and it just continues to trend in that direction. Now, in the current legislative session that was enacted last year, in the 25 budget, there's another $25 million allocated to excess costs. So that would, if we assume costs were to go up 10%, 10% of 260 million is 26 million. So I'm fearful that we'll again be in the same boat as the district and city and not realizing 100%. We won't even get our 91%. We'll be back in the low 70s again unless the state can do something.
So our long-term goals are obviously to stop this escalation, programs to bring students back and reduce external services. Bringing students back in-house allows us to control cost. The one barrier to this now is that we closed Bishop School, and all of our preschool kids are now in our 7 buildings, and we're running out of space to bring some of these students back. So we'll have to be really creative with that. Again, excess cost reimbursement rate, like Bob just explained, 71.4%. We're in the highest tier. Norwich is the highest tier of, we were supposed to get that 91%. We're in the highest tier. So this is, he just talked about the negative impact of that. The ECS Alliance scheduled to increase by $3,788,479. That's the governor's proposal. Last year's approved budget was $3,286,917, and that's a difference of $501,562.
So it's not increasing by 3.7 million, it's increasing by 500.
We don't know yet.
Yeah, I can add a little to that if you want. As you all know, the state has a 2-year budget, and in last year's legislative session, when it came to ECS, they hastened the full funding of ECS. So at last year's point in time, if you go back to the handouts that we had, it was like, in round numbers, 3.2 million. So in the governor's proposed budget, his proposal, unlike other years where he tweaked ECS, he did not do that. He left it intact. But formulistically, Norwich is slated to receive an extra $501,000 based on enrollment and economics. So that's in his proposed budget. We don't know at this point in time,
What the legislature
will it stay based on, and I'm hopeful that it will, because unlike other years where he was robbing from Peter to pay Paul and holding towns harmless, he left it alone. Our scheduled increase of $501,000 is strictly formalistically. So that's a huge impact to us, $501,000.
Thank you.
Can't see from here. It should be on. No, you want to take it. So, as most of you know, ESSER 3 will be fully spent by Norwich Public Schools by the end of June. Approximately 52 FTEs plus the SRO program is funded for the 23-24. We're currently doing a lot of analyzing and restructuring, and that's ongoing. Health insurance, final cost is not known. This is fluctuating between 10 and 14% increase. We have currently budgeted 10% in this budget proposal. We're exploring other options with the city versus self-funded. We'll have a more exact number in May. Workman's compensation, the same, exploring other options with the city versus self-funded. We have another unfunded mandate of the implementation of menstrual products for the legislation, and we budgeted $50,000 for that. And this is our last slide, just to recap. Tuitions are at 38.8%. NFA has a 3.75% increase. Griswold, 3.25% increase. Again, our special education outplacements are 11.7 million. And again, the XX cost is at 71.4 when we were promised 91%. And now we're available for any questions that you may have.
Members, questions? Alderman Singh?
Thank you. So 2 questions. The first one is the line item 57735, software licensing. Why it's going so up, almost 75% increase? Are we getting any more softwares?
I'm sorry, which item are you on?
It's a line item 57735, software licensing. Sorry, I don't have page number on it, but,
You're on page 116?
oh, no, actually, I was looking from this one.
Oh, okay.
There's no page numbers.
Now we know to number these pages.
It's software.
Thank you. Okay, so this is. You found it?
Yeah. it's-
Sorry, what is your question?
Any specific reason why it's going up 75%?
Yeah, we've got to get to the software. When technology originally submitted their software budget, it was $1.1 million. It included several software packages that were being funded by the ESSER grants. So in the packet, software is broken out by academic needs, administrative needs, general business administration. I'm trying to get to that section in there. We had several meetings with the cabinet level people in technology to review the software, was it new software, what's needed, and the number was reduced downward from 1.1 million down to the 770,000. So I'm not the software expert, but there's a section in here that details what is new and where it's used. I'm just trying to get to that piece now.
And the second question was all the software upgrades that we are doing or whatever we need, these can be used in our new schools as well.
I'm assuming they are.
That's a
the
big
academic
investment.
ones, Lisa, Jamie, and Susan would know about those, but
Yeah.
I know we did analysis in terms of every software we have, like if we have 100 licensed, we have 100 users, can we reduce this down from 100 to 80? Some of the software packages were normal 3-year renewals. A couple of them we dropped to 1-year renewals to lessen the impact on this year's budget. So there's a section in here, software by application. It details, it's probably about 4 or 5 pages long. It details the software, whether it's by human resources, operations of the district, academic. It gives a brief description of each software. Tells where it was previously funded, and there's a projected cost for each one. There's a summary section which details whether it was existing software funded by the Board of Ed, if it was existing migrated over from a grant, or if it's new software. One of the new softwares that was a direct outgrowth of COVID was GoGuardian. When everybody went to online learning and access, they needed to have software in there to protect students and so on and so forth. I'm not a tech expert, so I can't go into any more detail than that.
I can just elaborate a little bit on that for academics. We did look into that, and we did cut quite a few items for that for academically, and looked at some free software that we can use. So we did cut down at least 3 programs within our academics. One of them was $214,000
That was previously grant funded.
yeah.
And these are subscriptions, or we are buying the software, or we are paying for subscriptions?
There's subscriptions and licenses.
Oh, okay,
I don't believe we buy any software.
okay.
They become obsolete so quickly. Companies know that they need to constantly upgrade and change things, meet the needs of our educational world. So subscriptions are usually the way that we go.
The- Towards the back of your package, it's like the last 5 or 6 pages that has the detail on all the software.
Okay. And my second question is, if we, let's say, stick with the budget which has been proposed by city manager, what will be the services that will be impacted?
Well, we've already started looking and restructuring. It'd be premature to talk about that. We haven't sorted that all out. I know we're going to have some ad hoc meetings where we'll talk more about that, but it will definitely affect many staff members.
I would say it would probably affect every aspect of the operation, from business operations to facilities and maintenance to academics to administration.
It would be, when we talked about that, it would be equitable across schools, including central office.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from other members? President Pro Tem.
So right now, the city manager's proposed and the board adopted budget $7 million apart. Just based on your response to Alderman Singh, that's not money we're going to find in your budget. Fair? So you talk about restructuring, and I don't know, I'm a little concerned that there isn't enough restructuring to meet a $7.2 million gap. Is that a fair thing to say?
That's fair.
I think that's more than fair.
With regard to excess cost, we heard from our delegation in Hartford that it is more likely to be the 71.4% than it is to be 91% reimbursement. So I just want to be clear, that's the basis of your current budget?
Yeah, I took your same approach, and if you go back to what Einstein says, the same thing, expect different results. I put it in at 72.8%, and it made that a known factor, and one of those decisions that would go through ad hoc after we get through more legislative knowledge and so on and so forth. Does it stay at 72%, or you to take the leap of faith and go to 91, knowing that it's a $600,000 problem that we'll have to own if it doesn't happen? So that's one of those risk items. Same thing with the magnet school tuitions. We took the leap of faith that, based on where the legislative body sits now, that a 58% cap on magnet schools and the VOA programs will be honored. If that doesn't happen, we have to add $375,000 to this budget because the tuitions are based at that level.
Thank you for that. And just one last point of information is that The ad hoc committee will begin to, we'll be scheduling, we'll be looking to schedule those meetings probably at some point next week for the time period after the council gets done with all of its budget hearings. So kind of plan accordingly that those meetings will start.
Be the
We're
latter
expecting
part
that.
of April, like the third
Yeah.
week in April and above.
Yes, I'd like to have us up and running before we get into the month of May. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other members, other questions? Alderwoman Gould.
You have 713 full-time employees.
0.6.
Okay. How many of those employees were added with the ESSER funds?
That's, what do you want to, I can answer if you go. That's a moving target. If I go back a year from now, in the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 grant, there were 115 FTEs. Since that time frame to now, it's down to 52. So there's been a migration as grant funding was eliminated and people left and resigned. Back in February or March of this year, we had 52 remaining. And Susan and Lisa and Jamie and HR have been working to figure out what will happen.
I just wonder if that was the best use of, it's not on your watch, but we hired a lot of people, you hired a lot of people with ESSER funds that we knew, or you knew, were not going to be recurring.
That's correct.
This past year's budget was $89 million. What was the total BOE budget with all of the federal and state grants for the 23-24 year? Because I think people see, oh, it's only, not that it's only, but they see $89 million. That's really not what it costs to run our school system, is it?
You're
No,
correct.
and-
So I'll just talk about the three buckets. So it's the 89 million, 10 million in Alliance, and then we had 4.88 million in ESSER 3. That's not included in this budget.
So in round numbers, that's 105 million.
So it's $105 million to educate 3,200 students.
No, it's.
No,
don't forget we
plus
have
NFA.
So it's approximately 4,500 students.
4,500 students. All right. On page 117 in the budget book, which you may or may not have in front of you.
We do not. It's the city's budget.
We don't have that in front of us.
Okay. Oh, look at,
Jessica.
about 3/4 down, page 117. It says ARP ESSER funds 29636. Allocation was 16,469,000, and you've expended 8 million of that 16 million, according to this.
Well, I can add a little color to that if you want. The ARP ESSER funds, that grant became available in 2021. That's when the grant was awarded. In the first year, obviously, nothing was spent. We were working down or spending off of ESSER 2. The numbers on this report are from the year-end 22-23 filing that I do with the state. It's, they show the approved allocation, and then it shows the amount in that column is the amount expended through that filing period of 22-23, a cumulative over a year-over-year period. If you, in 22-23, between federal and state funding, we spent a little over $18 million of federal money, which will include the ESSER grants, and $12 million of state funding. So it doesn't show you what was remaining at the start of this year. So in the ESSER 3 grant, there was approximately $4.9 million left at the start of this fiscal year.
Just to add to that too, when Senator Austin and Representative Wilson, they've been asking us questions during this time. One of the questions that we got was that it shows that you have not completed your ESSER 3, and so we explained to them that it will be by the end of June. By the end of June, we will have spent all of the ESSER 3 funds. But to them, it looks like we haven't.
Okay, and so I guess the same would hold true for the ESSER funds 29571, where you were awarded $1.9 million and you, according to this, spent 12,000.
Is that the first part? Where is that on?
Is that the 1,920,220?
Yes.
That was there were 4 buckets of, I'll call it COVID relief money. There was the original allocation that Governor Lamont issued, and that had to be spent between basically September and December 31st of 2020, and that was $6.2 million. That doesn't even show up on here. Then ESSER 1 came out, which is the $1.9 million that you're talking about. That started to be spent back in 2021, and this is a 22-23 year-end report. There was only $12,000 left of that grant that was spent. It's a very misleading government report. But that $1.9 million was the original ESSER 1. Then ESSER 2 came out, and we had about $7.9 million in that grant. And then the large one was the ARP ESSER. They got more creative with naming them, and that was the 16 million plus. I hope that's somewhat helpful.
Okay, yes, it is. And this is probably the hardest question for me to ask, but it's the one I'm asked the most. We're spending $100 million to educate our students. But the performance measures that people find online do not reflect, I believe, how hard our teachers, our staff, and our students are working. But people look at those numbers and say, well, why are we in the lowest percentile for this, the lowest percentile for that? Why do we have so much truancy? And I sort of shrug my shoulders and say, I don't know what the answer is. So is there an answer out there? If everyone is working so hard every day, why is it not reflected in our scoring?
So state scoring is one measure, but we also have some other measures that within our district, and we are showing, still need to get a lot better, but we are showing an impact from the staffing that we have now. But I understand that question.
And it's a difficult one to answer. And my last question.
I'll add that we also have a lot of needs here. We have a lot of
Just gonna go there.
socioeconomic status. We have a lot of SEL staff to help our students. We have challenging behaviors that we work on. So there's that part too.
What can the BOE staff, teachers do to get parents more engaged with their children's education?
So that's one of our missions this year was family engagement. As you know, it's been more difficult after COVID. So we do work on having a lot of events at the schools. The principals do a really nice job of setting up Zoom meetings so that parents can get involved with Zoom meetings. It's not just coming in. We're trying to resurrect our PTO meetings, which during COVID was pretty much non-existent. So there's a lot of building those things back up.
And I'd just like to add something. I'm not on the academic side, so I don't have a lot to add to that thing. I like sports. And I think as an outsider, the reintroduction of sports to the Norwich School District, especially at the middle school level, Lou Allen has done an exceptional job working with the administrators in the school. And it's involved all students. He has the step band come, the pep band, and families come out, and if you went to a soccer game or a basketball game, it's packed, and it actually ends up being an extension of family engagement, and in some ways, those coaches act as counselors and mentors, and I've seen, as an outsider, I wasn't looking for that, and Lou's talked to me in great depths how he's just seen a tremendous growth in the programs and in community involvement. He says, just come to a game. My God, everybody's active. So I think that's one of the positive things from a family engagement standpoint that I guess we should have expected it, but it wasn't on everyone's horizon.
Thank you.
I would also add that from some of our ESSER money, we did add instruments into the elementary schools, and we're now getting parents more engaged with the assemblies of the students with their band and chorus. So that's been a big factor of family engagement in the last 2 years, too.
And actually, to Susan's point, that's how we built the athletic program and bought the equipment along with all the PE equipment and things like that. And that's been a positive thing, working with the city's rec department as well.
Thank you.
Alderman Nash.
My question is more for the city manager. What is a $7+ million increase in the school budget due to our budget? Where does that take us? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
The increase that I propose, what does that do to our school budget?
no, if we add another $7 million, they're short $7 million. What if we throw another $7+ million at the school? What does that do to the budget, and how does that impact the citizens?
Well, that would add 3.5 mils approximately. You're shaking your head, yes? 3.
And what are we sitting at now?
32.5.
We're at, well, it's hard, again, it's hard to say because of everybody's assessment is different this year, but whatever it was, it would add about 3 mils to whatever we have.
Thank you.
So, you'd have to look at what your home was assessed at to see what obviously it'd be significant. It would be double what I've recommended, or triple.
Josh. 2.5. The growth in the value of a mill from last year to this year, what's the percentage? That might answer part of that question. Last year's mill is not this year's mill based on the reval. It's very different.
So, 6. Is this on?
Yes, it is.
Let's see. So the increase in the grand list alone reduced our mill rate by almost 12%. So, yeah, I think increasing, adding $6.8 million to the budget would be about 3 mills, which would be, the mill rate would be about 9% higher than it is in the proposed budget.
But what I was asking was the value of a mill under last year's mill rate. I think was about $1.8 million, somewhere in that value today.
It's pretty simple, 7.2 million divided by 3.
So it would be at 35.
Yeah. Value of a mill.
$1 million now. Yeah, I get it. Okay, about 2.4, something like that. Okay. Alderman Nash, you have other questions?
That was it, thank you.
If I could, one, I want to thank you for all the work you're doing, because in discussions we've had throughout the year since you arrived in this position, both of you in particular, and I thank you too, Bob, you've been here. I know how hard you're working. I know how you're examining everything, digging into the details, and trying to remanage what you were handed. Not an easy task. I'm looking at page 116 in the budget book. Special ed services, student transportation, tuition, software licensing. Some of those you can't control. Transportation, though, it's a $2.55 million increase from last year to this year. What's driving that increase?
I can speak to that somewhat. The 23-24 budget is probably understated from where it should be. If you recall, the transportation contract is a 5-year contract, and we went out to bid. So previously, buses were billed for all buses 12 hours a day. So in talking with providers, they said one way to reduce your costs would be to not bill all your buses for 12 hours a day, just come up with a tiered rate. So we changed that methodology in the contract. We actually used an outside transportation company to work with myself and Bob Casanova when we put the RFP together. At the time, contracts were going up 15 to 20% because of the cost of new buses, the cost of employment, labor, wages, and so on and so forth. So we were hopeful that by doing that, we wouldn't be facing a 20% increase. And then if you remember, the budget was approved at the second meeting in June. We ended up with maybe not the funding that we needed. Consequently, when we were making the budget fit, this year's budget is actually slightly under the 22-23 budget in hopes that there would be some savings. Well, those did not materialize with First Student, and in fact, their costs have gone up by about 20% this year. We're actually having a meeting with them tomorrow to see what we can do in terms of trying to reduce that for next year. We're looking at what buses actually need monitors. Monitor cost on a bus for Norwich is almost $5,000 a day. It's like just under $4,950 a day. If you do the math on 180 days, that comes to over $800,000, $900,000 a year. We're looking at possibly lengthening a bus run timing if we can reduce buses. So that's where we're going with that. The contract next year has a built-in 5% increase. So the $10.5 million is based on this year's cost estimate plus 5%. The other factor that's gone up has been the number of students that require individual van transportation for one reason or another. We're averaging right now about $20,000 a month for that. And that might only be transporting 5 or 6 students. So it's just a combination of a whole bunch of things.
And you said it was a 5-year contract. When does that end?
4 years from this year. One thing that could help the city in future contracts would be having a bus lot, a bus depot, whatever you want to call it, especially if we get towards electrical vehicles. One of the stipulations in the contract is that the buses must be housed in Norwich. The city receives substantial tax revenue, and that's very understandable. But right now, I believe it's the old Card McDonald lot is where the buses are, and STA has the contract on that. STA's a First Student, I'm sorry. I had STA on my mind. They have the lease on that, so there's really no other facility that could house the buses. So when that happens, you don't get bidders to come because there's no place for them to park the buses, and First Student's not going to give up the lease on that lot. That also wouldn't be a good place to have electric vehicles. We also can't put a diesel gas tank there because it's in a floodplain. So we end up paying slightly higher cost for diesel fuel. We did do a fuel contract this year, so for 75% of our estimated usage, and our price next year will be $2.98 a gallon, which is going to be less than it was this year. This year we were at $3.20. So we're doing what we can to minimize the transportation costs, but maybe as part of the building project, some of these schools that we're abandoning, or if Dodge Stadium had room, it doesn't take a lot to have a bus garage, a fence, a good-sized area that's secure to park the buses. Outside contractors have told us if you had a facility to park the buses, you'd lower your costs. If I compare our cost per bus per day, they're substantially higher than our neighboring towns, and that's probably one reason.
If the city was able to locate that facility for you between now and the end or the adoption of this budget, is that something you could bring to the table?
We could have conversation, we can initiate that tomorrow with the bus company.
Discussions, yeah.
But I would guess as a business, have a committed lease right now with that property, and they're on the hook for it.
Can I ask, and again, this is something you inherited,
Yes.
because this goes back around 2010 or 11, when there was a contract that was let out, and one of the stipulations was, as you pointed out, to be located here in the city for the tax revenue, but at that time, that provided only one bid. There was no competition. Was that still the same situation at this last
We
bid?
had a second bid, and it was really what I'd call an invalid bid, because they indicated that they would house the buses on the same lot that they're currently located on, and we knew that First Student's not giving up that lease, and their bid was higher.
Got it.
But when I go to the CASBO meetings and I talk to the, the DATCOs, the STAs, the competition, they say, you're requiring a 12-hour day for every bus, you don't need that, and there's no other place to put the buses, so we can't bid.
Mayor, I just want to add to that, we're really concerned about the buses, and, Jamie's been, since she got in, really looking at it. We're actually at schools looking how many kids are on the buses. Do we really need 52 big buses? Jamie and I don't think so. So we're gathering some more data on that to see if we can cut down on the buses, and like Bob said, look for longer. I don't know where they got the number of how many minutes for the runs, but it's not a state requirement. So we're looking to add to the length of it and be able to not have maybe by 10 buses, which is a significant amount of money.
Just for everyone's benefit, we run on a daily basis 52 Type 1 or larger buses and 38 Type 2 buses. Some of the run times are dictated by our high school students, because the same buses that transport the high school students might transport the elementary school students. So some of the runs have to be shorter in order to still make the elementary school schedules. We'll learn through our meetings if we have to change the start time of the school by 15 minutes to eliminate a couple buses, that might be something financially worth doing, but that's going to be a process that we're starting tomorrow.
Again, I want to thank you all, particularly Jamie, you came back. You had retired. You answered the call. That means a lot, I think, to all of us. I know how hard the both you and Bob are working to look at this and realign things to save while we await new schools. They're on the horizon, but right now we still have to get through these budget cycles until they become operational after being built. So thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Singh, I saw your hand go up.
Thank you. So not really directly related to this budget cycle, but do you know on top of your head how much transportation costs? Transportation cost is around 10 million, right? 10.5. Now, in that 10.5, there is, I guesstimate almost 40% might be the special ed transportation cost.
Special, it's broken out in this packet. I believe it's about 5 million for special.
Five.
I'd have to look at it. And the majority of the costs do go to our prime carrier. We do have costs that go to private providers like Curtin and so on and so forth. And we try to shop the runs when we can, when we have an individual student that has to go somewhere. Who can do that?
The reason is because we cannot provide those services in Norwich to them.
That's correct. That's an
So
academic.
while we spending $385 million on new schools, I'm sure you all are trying to make sure those things can be in-housed. I know when I served in Board of Ed, we calculated it was around $4 million that could be potentially saved if those services can be provided in-house.
And that's a good point. We've been talking about that. So, the schools are set up to bring our kids back and to have our own programs in these schools. So as we go through these building committees, we're making sure that we have that room in there. And that would be a huge savings once that happens. We just need a bridge between now and the new schools.
And my second comment is on the state formula. So state formula doesn't do justice to our amount of work we put into our kids, and my daughter also goes to Norwich Public Schools, so I see what kind of education she's getting. But, so my only question is, and part of the, I think, reason was because we don't have our own high school. So a lot of good stuff that happened, we don't get credit for it. But that's actually a very good point that Stacy bring it up, because normal people go on Zillow if they're buying house and they'll see our ratings for the school so low. So I think that's something, I don't know, collaboratively we can work with our state delegation, or however we can improve that formula to some extent, so it reflect all the work that we put into our students. So we should look into that. Thank you.
Yes, you're correct. By the way that formula works, without having a high school, it does hurt us.
That's correct. Alderman Gould, you had your hand up.
Yeah, what do you think it would, if we had our own bus lot, what are we talking about in savings?
That's a hard question. I'll have to, see what I can dig up or find on that, but
But we're not talking about $5 million in savings.
probably not, no. But it would be substantial. I mean, if I look at the daily cost of a bus, I had done it one time, and I think when I did it in the previous year, the differential between some of the neighboring towns and our towns when we were doing was $80 a bus. And if I said if we could lower the cost, if our costs are $80 higher because of no competition and so on and so on and so forth, $80 a day times 90 buses times 180 school days, I think came up to 1.2 million. So I'm convinced that if we had our own place to park buses, we'd have more competition, and competition would bring lower prices. I mean, Norwich they tell me it's a difficult district to drive. It's narrow streets. We need flat-nose buses. And I look at some of the same cities and towns that our current vendor services, and the rates are much less than ours. So I just wonder. I mean, I can't guarantee it, but I think it would be substantially less than what it would be. There'd be some savings. And if we own a piece of property, other than insurance and having a small building on it, I don't know if they do maintenance, what they do for maintenance on the bus lot. The old Card McDonald car lot is not, a prized, I'm not mean-mouthing the place, but it's an old place.
Thank you.
President Pro Tem.
So I'd like to circle back to something that Alderwoman Gould said earlier, because I get the same question, from folks. They say, the Board of Ed wants to spend $100 million. How come all the kids aren't in the 75th percentile? And this is what I say to them. I say that because kids are not 2x4s. And I'm going to borrow this a little bit. This was something I read some time ago. It's that, when a carpenter looks at a stack of 2x4s, they get to choose which ones they're going to build the walls out of. So they pick the straightest ones, the ones that are all long enough, and and they build beautiful walls. But when it comes to educating kids, totally different story. A teacher walks in a classroom with 25, 28 kids, right? You have to take them as they are. You have to take them where they are. So when you look at a group of 7th graders, and you have a couple of 7th graders, let's say, in a class who are reading at a 4th grade level, and then by the time they're ready to leave 8th grade 2 years later and go on to high school, they're reading at a 7th grade level, that's a win. That's a win across the board. Right, so that's how we measure success, and that's why we spend the money that we do. Because I get that same difficult question, because folks want to oversimplify this and put it in a results-minded mode, but they're failing to understand what positive results really are. So, as we continue to review this budget and deliberate more and talk about these huge dollar numbers, right? We need to be thinking about those kids and how we're getting them, well, actually, how you all are getting them from point A to point B, knowing that they're all not starting in the same place. And it's more about their overall growth than it is about showing up on some percentile report that somebody published up, at CSD.
I'd just like to add to that, and I like your analogy of students aren't two-by-fours. We talk a lot about costs of special education, the excess costs. So when I got this report today, I sorted it a few different ways. So I sorted it from highest uncapped entitlements down to lowest. So there's 166 school districts on this report, and Norwich ranks 25th in terms of, and that's not a positive thing to say necessarily, but we're 25th in terms of spending. So we had 3.145 million. The highest school was New Britain, so if I 12 million, and they were shortchanged 3.4 million. So I go down the list of the top schools that have high excess costs for special education. It's all the cities. It's New Britain, Bridgeport, Hartford, Stamford, New Haven, Bristol, Waterbury, so on and so forth. So then I went to the back page, and I found 16 districts that didn't have a single student that qualified for excess costs. In other words, they didn't have one student that the school board had to spend more than 4.5 times on their education. And the town names are Barkhamsted, Canaan, Chester, Colebrook, Cornwall, Kent, North Canaan, Sharon, and if I Google those things, those are some of the wealthiest towns, and I can't wrap my arms around why, that means every family is students that have special needs, but yet there are none in those districts that have excess costs. So this phenomenon is impacting the cities and urban districts at a disproportional rate, and we happen to be 25th highest out of 166 towns, so that's like no students. It goes to your 2x4 analogy. It's the environment, it's the students, it's the world we live in.
Litchfield County. That's mostly what you described.
Yeah,
They're all in the upper northwest corner.
yeah. So do they all, if their families have student special needs, do they send them? I don't know. I don't know what to draw from that, except that they don't need any state help.
Price of an acre, price of land, price of a home, way above where we are down here. Families don't look to locate there, my opinion, but we've talked about, and I don't know if you're going to get into nuts and bolts, Sue and Jamie, we talked about in the future having a site within our own city where it could actually become a revenue stream, because we then begin serving the small towns around us, and they send their students here. I know, again, that's down the road, but I'm going to assume that's still an issue that we could continue to talk about.
Yes, so we have had those discussions, and we would love that. We do have the staff here that love working with all of our students, and so I know that if we can find a building to do that with, we can do a lot with it. And I also want to just go off of the testing and what people see. Often with standardized testing, there's low motivation with our students, or 3 through 8. So we have to find a better way of motivating. Sometimes they don't always show what they really know in those. And that's something I've also talked with Dr. Cannell at NFA, that we've had this, we share that same sentiment about how our kids do on those standardized testing.
I can email this report to everybody tomorrow if you'd like.
Please. Yeah. Member, yes, Alderman Bettencourt.
When in evaluating student performance, as long as we're talking about this a little bit, is there a matrix that assesses by the student? I mean, the improvement of a student, an individual student, and and then coming up with an aggregate that way?
They do. So they actually leveled the playing field some years ago, where the state does they look at whatever their score was in 3rd grade, they say, no matter how low or high it is, they come up with another measure of where that student would be. What would that number look like if it's 100% growth? So they no longer say, you've made level 3 and level 4, you're where you should be. Now it's based on their growth. So that is true. They did level the playing field like that.
Okay, good.
Alderman Nash?
Oh, sorry, did you have to?
Yeah, and yet,
Oh, go
and yet
ahead.
we still relatively have, comparatively have low scores, even
We
though
look at
that's
the
the case.
standardized testing, yes.
Oh, okay, what about in the methodology we were just talking about?
So if we, for our in-house,
Yeah.
when we have our in-house, like, for example, we use right now one where it does measure it and it does show growth. It shows better growth than our SBAC scores, our in-house ones, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Nash.
But since we're making comments and piggyback off of Alderman DeLucia, the 2x4 thing is a good analogy. I'm going to steal it and use it in the future. But schools aren't the same as they were 10 years ago. I was a DARE officer, and I taught at all the public schools. And then I went and worked for a large city's school system. And I don't want to use the word necessarily students, but the clients that are being sent to schools, they're not the same as they were when I taught the DARE program. I actually sat in a class a few years ago, and it was testing. And there was a kid bouncing a ball off the wall during the testing. And I would say about 3 or 4 times the teacher asked to stop bouncing the ball against the wall. And the kid made a little bit of a scene, and then this was before you had security, and was asked to go to the office. We're not getting the same kind of kids that we did in the 70s that we're getting in the 2000s. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, because I'm the biggest fan of the Norwich Public Schools. I had 2 children that went through it. I coached in it. I taught in it. The teachers are magnificent. And you can't gauge growth, I don't think, anymore, because schools are not just about reading, writing, and arithmetic anymore. It's not it. And I'm glad to hear instruments are back, because I know that music adds synapses to the brain, and it helps children learn. So I don't look at the test scores of the standardized testing and say our kids are failing, our schools are failing, because I know there's got to be another matrix. Because I can see some of the development. I see kids today. I talk to kids today. I'm still involved in sports. So please understand that I don't know how you guys how you talk to people. I tell people all the time when they ask me why our schools are failing, and I'm like, they're not. You just don't understand what the challenges that they're meeting, and that the progresses that they are making, because I think you guys are doing a great job. So I know I've sat up here many years ago and voted, for certain budgets and stuff like that, but please me, there's no bigger fan of the school system than, I'm just saying, I'm a big fan, big cheerleader. And please keep doing what you're doing. Find the savings. There's no way you're going to find $7 million in savings, but do what you can, and know that I'll do what I can to support your budget in the future.
Thank you.
Other members at this time? I think our task would be a lot easier if the federal government carried its load, its share, which they talk about. You hear talk about 40% funding for special ed. I don't think we're at 10% nationally. It's less than that. And if anybody is ever listening, our federal delegation, if there's an issue they ought to be working on, it's getting special ed funded properly at the national level. You don't even hear them talk about it. All of them. Doesn't matter who they are. And I don't know if there's any information you can share with us, or any hint on how we could get them to focus on it, besides subs and everything else. I mean, the education of these kids is as if not more important. And they're dumping on the state's dumping on us. And you're seeing it right now in the budget proposals. Maybe we need to start shouting at them, I don't know.
I think our local delegation fully understands it. We have conversations with them. The last conversation we had, 2 weeks ago? Kathy Austin, I think she's co-chair of the Appropriations Committee. She said she has $700 million of needs and $11 million to play with. And, that's not good math to making things work well.
My comments are really focused on federal.
Yeah.
I know how hard
She said
Kathy works.
It goes downhill.
Yep, yeah. I don't know, I mean, maybe all of us collectively should start writing to them, Board of Ed, council, together, city manager, everybody, and urge them to make it a priority, because they're clearly not. they're just ignoring it. And that, if you look at the cost drivers, that's a significant hit here. I think a year ago, the average special ed population was about 11%. Last year, we were 18%. I think we're 20% or higher now. And that makes our task that much more difficult.
And if you look at the numbers, the state this year has almost an $80 million shortfall in what they're funding versus what they should fund. That's a big difference.
Yeah, very big. Yeah. If other members have anything else they want to ask, share, if not, thank you all. Couple task, homework, look to see if we could find space for buses, clearly, and continue those discussions on a building. Could be something to be realized there in the short term that would help you negotiate, particularly like with your meeting starting tomorrow. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.